main figures of the Renaissance. We're going to focus on 4 important artists, 1 poet, 3 painters, although one of those painters was many other things. I'm referring to Leonardo, which is going to be our 4th personage. Francesco Petrarca, this guy in the picture, was born in 1304, just a few years before the death of Dante Alighieri. Florence and other cities, Arno, Pisa, Arezzo, where he was actually very active in all the region called Tuscany, where the Italian language was originally forged. Petrarca had the great idea of writing poetry in his vernacular language, in his Tuscan language, which later would become the national language of Italy, Italian as we know it. Rime, the title of his main book, rhymes. Very simple, very classic. The main strophe, the kind of stanza he prefers, is the sonnet. And what do his sonnets talk about? Love. Love, the importance of living this life in this world at this moment. We're going to talk about Petrarchian sonnets in the next chapter, but we have to remember, without Petrarca, the rest of Renaissance poetry wouldn't have been possible. Petrarca was a guy who was actually very, very sensitive. His beloved Laura Portinari was a young woman who didn't pay much attention to him. That's, in many cases, the tragedy of poets, and that's a source of inspiration at the same time. How to compensate the loss, the pain, the absence of the beloved person. It has to be through art, perfecting art. And the best way in this case was to get rid of all forms, of all rhythms, and look for inspiration in the colloquial language, in the simplicity, in the linearity of the expression. Contemporary to Petrarca, this is a monument of his in Italy, was Boccaccio. Giovanni Boccaccio was a poet, but he is mainly known for his prose. His fabulous collection of short stories called the Decameron, literally the 10 days. It's about 7 girls and 4 guys who try to escape from the pestilence in Florence. Instead of waiting to die, they go to the countryside. There was no internet, no TV, no radio, no phones. How did people have some entertainment? By telling stories to each other, by perfecting the art of storytelling. So these 100 stories, 10 per day, finally become classics because they challenge many moral principles. They are known because of their erotic content, their sense of humor, their defiance of church and political authorities. Boccaccio has become another important writer, another classic of the Renaissance, precisely because of the simplicity and the wittiness of his prose. A little bit later, in 1435, Sandro Botticelli, whose alleged self-portrait appears here, perfected the art of simple expression through color and form. This is a portrait or self-portrait that appears in one of his paintings, the Adoration of the Wise Men, Adoratio of the Magi, in 1475, when he was 40 years old. His most known work, The Birth of Venus. The myth of the birth of Venus is that the testicles of Uranus were thrown into the sea, and they developed and gave form to this beautiful woman who was actually the goddess of love, Aphrodite for the Greeks, Venus for the Romans. sailing on a seashell and surrounded by the god Aeolus and other deities celebrating her appearance. It's a celebration of life, a celebration of erotic love, a celebration of color. If you see, for example, the features of this beautiful painting, her contours are vertical, her expression, as we will see in detail a little later, are also very profound. There's perspectives here. You can see the bottom of the horizon, the sky. There's a close-up, the shore. The entire composition talks about festivity, talks about even movement. One could practically perceive that there is the sound of the waves, the whisper of the wind, the laugh of the people surrounding the appearance of the goddess of love. Then, in more detail, we have in the Galleria degli Uffizi in Florence, people still admiring 500 years later this extraordinary painting in which the face of Nicoletta Vespucci, a young woman who was only 14 when Botticelli met her, again, just like Dante, just like Petrarca, she married someone else and she died young. This seems to be a pattern, but it's also the source of inspiration for these extraordinary artists who try to reconstruct through going back to classical models. Now she looks like a Greek statue at some point, but probably more alive. The spontaneity of her hair flying through the wind, her expression, who is serene and severe and at the same time calm. All these features are so hard to get that one would think that Botticelli was taking a photograph, but he wasn't. There was no photography at that time. And that's one of the great merits of Botticelli's art, something that we can see also in another well-known piece, his consecration of springtime. But let's go straight to Leonardo. Leonardo is well known for many reasons. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, an inventor, an anatomist, a man of letters, a politician in many ways, the prototype of the Renaissance man, a man who could handle different artistic languages, who had a profound knowledge of many, many issues, and that interchanged that knowledge with others and also for his own work. Leonardo, for example, designed perfect symmetry for this figure called the Man of Vitruvius, or the Vitruvian man, as an homage to the Roman architect Vitruvius, who was thinking of linearity, proportion, and simplicity. Leonardo also designed this beautiful horse with all the features of the muscles and the tendons and the structure of the animal that could stand on its 2 feet, out of 4, of course. The well-known Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is the portrait of a woman, a young woman, who seems to be smiling, but at the same time thinking, looking at us while we can look at her and contemplate in perspective the Tuscan landscape. It's probably the best known work by Leonardo, now being exhibited in the Museum of Louvre in Paris, and it still amazes the simplicity, the expression, and the beauty of not only her face, but also her hands. And finally, we get to 2 other works, anatomic drawings. Leonardo was a curious mind. Leonardo was the model of the modern researcher. He wanted to know everything. Nothing human was alien to him. Nil humanum a me alienum putu used to say in Latin, the classics. Nothing human is alien to me. I want to know everything that has to do with human beings. That's precisely what humanism is. So, he investigated corpses. He opened bodies, just like modern surgeons do, just to know what was inside. And from that knowledge, he would design his artistic works that seemed to be so real and so alive, just like the Mona Lisa. And he was, of course, an inventor. This is one of his many imagined devices, the flying machine. The flying machine in the early 16th century. Remember, Leonardo lived between 1452 and 1519. There was no airplane there. How could he conceive of something that could fly, that could imitate the movement and the simplicity of the birds in the air? He never was able to put his idea of the flying machine in place, but at least he had the ambition, he had the vision to propose that the human being shouldn't be limited to the surface of the earth. That's revolutionary. People wouldn't understand at that time, would call him crazy, but that's how progress is made, sometimes by crazy ideas carried out by very brilliant men and women like Leonardo.